Hello and welcome to the FYI podcast. That's for your ignorance. My name is Zach Qureshi, and today we have a pod all about movies, the Oscars, streaming services, our theaters dying, all that and more coming up. Welcome back to the FYI podcast again. I'm Zach Qureshi, and today I'm joined with two exciting guests, Dr. Charlie Warren, an associate professor of visual performing arts and film studies here at UTD. Hi, Dr. Warren.
Hi, so glad to be here, Zach. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. I'm also joined with Dr. Mark Rosen, an associate professor of arts and humanities who specializes in art history, as well as an associate dean of undergraduate studies for arts and humanities. Hi, Dr. Rosen.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks to you both for being here. So, our listeners may not know this, but in addition to being a political science major, I am also a film studies minor, and I've taken 3 courses with Professor Warren, so this is a very exciting episode for me. So, right off the bat, last weekend it was the Oscars. And so this year, the Oscars itself looked a little bit different than they have in the past. So the Academy said that they wanted to make the ceremony appear sort of like a movie. And the ceremony was more about filmmakers as filmmakers than it was about movie stars as celebrities. So there was no one host. The time saved by not having any audience games or skits, the presenters could describe at length the histories of the nominees. Additionally, due to COVID, only the nominees themselves and family members were present rather than the event becoming a who's who of Hollywood. So this question is for either of you. Would you see these as good changes, or would you say the old way is better? And what other feelings do you have about the ceremony itself?
Well, I can just say that visually, I think as a show, I actually liked it more. I liked the kind of lounge setting of it. It did feel like old school Hollywood. I think the performances were definitely missed. I feel like without those musical performances, for example, we lose a lot of the entertainment value of the event. But otherwise, I felt pretty happy with watching it this way. It felt more intimate. Let me put it that way. It felt more intimate, less glitzy, and that I liked about it. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I know that the reviews have been very mixed. You know, that the producers that they handed it over to Steven Soderbergh, who's a Hollywood director, and Stacey Sher, who's a producer kind of out of independent cinema originally, and that Soderbergh is on record historically of saying there are problems with it when he was nominated for an Oscar, how much he hated the ceremony and how terrible it is to be in the room, and the complaints that I have heard in the last few days about the show. They're different than the complaints that you usually hear, but there are always complaints. People, like if you follow Twitter during the broadcast, there is a gripe fest every year. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that people are torn from these conflicting impulses. Like, do they want it to be rewarding the best? Do they want it to be somehow about changing representation within the industry? Or do they want it to be like an advertisement for the movies that those people that aren't that interested in them can be included in, and those 3 things are like completely competing impulses. And so like, I'm almost always happy at the Oscars. Like, I love that it exists, period. But I would say that those competing impulses are really problematic. And I think that that's like, when you do a cultural like analysis of what the Oscars are about, I think you really have to look at all of those things, and you never can satisfy everybody with that at all. But that's being said, I thought this show it was very different. In our lifetime, there has never been a show that looked anything like that. So I appreciate that. Like, it will, and I would imagine Soderbergh had cameras on himself during the setup and during the show, and that we will see something behind the scenes at some later date if the Academy allows that to happen. I mean, they are very secretive. That we may learn a lot more about what this was about, in the future.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I really liked the way that they introduced the nominees with like, they asked cinematographers, what would you say, how would you define cinematography? They asked some directors, what were the like influential movies in your life, stuff like that, which I thought was really interesting. And I didn't really miss the sort of like Ellen DeGeneres going into the crowd sort of games. I didn't really miss that at all. But what I did miss was like clips. I feel like it's really cool to say, here's the nominees for best visual effects, and this guy really likes ET, and that's fun and that's intimate on a personal level for that person. But at the same time, especially for something like visual effects, I would have preferred to see maybe a clip from the movie. They didn't do any clips, which I thought was kind of weird, because when I watched all the Oscar noms, but usually I don't. And so if I'm watching the Oscars, having only seen a handful of the best pictures, what have you, and visual effects comes up, and I see something really interesting, then maybe I go and watch that movie later or something like that, or I get a better sense for why it's nominated. But without the clips, I felt I was a little bit lost. But yeah, I would agree that I generally liked the no host, sort of more personal format. Except that they did one kind of audience gag with Lil Rel going around and asking about the songs. And so that was a baffling sort of segment, I thought, because it's like they weren't doing the games, and then Lil Rel just goes around and does a game, and then Andra Day just starts cursing up a storm, the actress from the U.S. versus Billie Holiday, and then Glenn Close, knowing what the bud is, and dancing to the song from Spike Lee's School Days. That was baffling, and I'm a huge Spike Lee fan. I don't know if you can tell from my Defy Bloods hat that I'm wearing. So that was a really weird thing, just for me to watch.
Well, wait, can I interrupt? I think that that bit, like, it was a bit, with the thing with Glenn Close, but it unfolded in a way that made it seem completely like haphazard or something. Like it became a bit like at the end, and I was like, okay, like they've landed it. But for the first 5 minutes while they had Andra Day and whoever else they were going around, it was sort of like let's move on, let's get through this. And it was so late in the show when it was sort of things were getting draggy that it was sort of like they could have scrapped it, And I think that they actually made a mistake to not make some game time changes during the show. I think they could have righted some of the problems that happened at the end, I think, if they had, with a little bit of foresight, I think.
Yeah, I would say
let's not forget to mention sorry, that it went on for over 3 hours, right? It was still a 3 hour and 20-minute show. So
it always happens, but I'd say that to me that's not a problem. I could watch the 5-hour Oscars, but most people do not want that. But I would say that the difference this year was that they had no timer on the speeches, and so Thomas Vinterberg spoke for 5 minutes or something, and I thought mostly that was great. The people who won for documentary, My Octopus Teacher, that was a terrible speech, and that went on for that went on forever. It felt like it went on forever. But the other ones were really, I was glad to watch them kind of build themselves to an interesting place and then say, this is where I'm stopping.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that specifically you mentioned Thomas Vinterberg's speech. I thought that was a really touching speech. He spoke to the death of his daughter towards the end of that speech. I thought that was a really, really great speech. And there were some great speeches. I thought Daniel Kaluuya did a great speech until he mentioned his parents having sex for some reason.
It was great.
Yeah, that was fun because I went to a small Oscars party in the backyard of my friend's house, and we were all just reacting to it as it happened. And there were a handful of moments like the Glenn Close thing, like Daniel Kaluuya, where we were just like, huh? Like we were just like, what's going on? Especially towards the end of the night, once we get into the winners themselves.
Well, Zach, can I ask, what were you and your friends hoping for? When you get together to watch the Oscars, what is it that you hope? Are you hoping to see the ones that you care about the most winning? Are you just having a good time? Are you interested in the celebrities and the fashion? What? Because I'm interested in all of those things, but I would say that some people really watch with one or the other. I just want to see the people win that I like,
Yeah. So it's, for me personally, it's less about celebrities and it was more about watching movies that I wanted to win, see if they would, and just sort of, it's been a year of pandemic. I hadn't seen a lot of these friends for a while, so that was part of it. But it's just about sort of hanging out with like-minded film friends and seeing hopefully what I want to see winning. And then it's like a sports event for me, where it's when it doesn't win, I'm like, like you said, My Octopus Teacher won. I thought that was the least interesting of the documentary nominees. I would have given it to Collective at Crip Camp if it were me. So that was one where I was like, and same thing with live action short, Two Distant Strangers, I thought was really in bad taste and my least favorite of any short in any category. So when that one, I was like, and then, when they switched it up and they showed Best Picture before they did the Best Actor categories, we were all really confused. And then at the end of the night, we were screaming, how did that happen? But I watch it sort of like a sports event in that way, where it's my favorite movies are my favorite teams, that kind of thing. Yeah. And that, I watched the that's how I looked at the nominees as well. Like I was really mad that Delroy Lindo got snubbed for best actor, and First Cow got snubbed for cinematography and stuff like that. But yeah, that's how I watch it. Is mostly from a movies I like winning or losing kind of standpoint.
Mhm.
And speaking of, how would you guys say you felt? I know you didn't watch literally every nom, but how would you guys say you felt about what won and what lost in general? Do you feel like the right or the most important movies won, or do you feel like they made some incorrect decisions?
I definitely agree with you. I think the documentary feature was a total misfire. I think that really reveals a kind of short-sighted view of documentary. I think they often go for these kind of feel good or make yourself feel good kind of movies in the documentary category. And, you know, I just think there were better movies in that category for sure. Frankly, any of them are better movies than My Octopus Teacher. And I recently have just been catching up with Time, which I thought was amazing and very much a story for our moment, you know, and so needs to be told, has never been told in that way. I just loved it, right? I thought a lot about Boyhood. I thought, you know, that we just haven't seen a documentary with that much reach in a really long time, and to be about mass incarceration and racial justice just seemed just right. And the fact that they got it wrong, I felt like was a huge misfire. Same with Crip Camp. I think that could have also, you know, that was a great, inspiring, important historical documentary. It's not, you know, flashy, but it gets a good story really right. So for me, those were, I think that category was a huge disappointment.
Yeah, like I said, I think Crip Camp tells an incredible sort of untold story about disabled rights. It's more of a straightforward documentary in itself, but the story is important. Collective is a highly journalistic, very important documentary. Time, like you mentioned, is also very important. I think quite experimental in the way that it's shot. My mole, the mole agent is a really fun documentary. Got a lot of heart, and I thought more interesting than. I mean, I didn't dislike My Octopus Teacher, but I think it's definitely the least interesting of the five. So I would agree.
I haven't seen it. I mean, but it's true. I think that there have been very good documentaries that have been frozen out in recent years. You know, for like Free Solo won a couple years ago, and I think that might have been the year of I'm Not Your Negro, which was a widely seen, heavily celebrated, very good documentary. You know, 20 Feet from Stardom, Searching for Sugar Man, like the Searching for Sugar Man, those all won. And I don't think of any of those as being really formally interesting or really important. You know, and I think. You know, there were some. I haven't seen all of these. I haven't seen My Octopus Teacher, but there were you know several other really like highly watched documentaries. Boy State, Dick Johnson is Dead, like that are you know accessible on all these different streaming services, and people, or even like American Utopia. I mean, if you're like a Spike Lee person, you know, like I don't know if that count. I don't know if they do performance documentaries, but like that's great too. You know, any of them seem better than the one that won, so it does. But I mean, there's a question of like, why do they honor this? And I think this is like an Oscars question, which is how do we really know what they're doing? You know, like that we never see the votes. We don't know if it's close. And you know, when you hear people talking about the Oscars, they say, well, the Academy really wanted to do this year, and it's like, do we know that? Like, I actually think we don't. I mean, I think that it's a bunch of individual voters, and most of them are in Los Angeles, and so many of them are kind of riding the same zeitgeist. And I'm from LA. I grew up there. I grew up among all these movie people. And when I go home between Thanksgiving and February, if I'm ever in LA for a couple days on the West Side, you feel the vibrations of like what people are talking about. Like I feel like when I go there for a few days right at the end of the year, I come back knowing like what will win Oscars or what will be the conversation before like and because people desperately care there, you know, it is part of the ecosystem. So it's like, but to say like the Academy wants to do something or they want to reward somebody 20 years later, it's like, I don't really think that is how it works, and we'll never know unless they release ballots. Like how voting works. You know, it's not like an election where you have all this data after the fact. You don't have anything.
Yeah, I mean, you commonly see people saying, "Oh, this actor only won because it was their due, and the Academy wanted to award them," or "This movie was a social justice movie," what have you. But yeah, it is if it's secret ballots, it's hard to say. Yeah, like you mentioned, Dick Johnson is Dead. I really loved that documentary. I thought it was really interesting. sort of formically. And I don't think that American Utopia was eligible because I don't think concert films tend to be, because they didn't nominate, like, speaking of Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. They didn't. I don't think I got any nominations or anything.
Which is, like dear to all of us, I would imagine. It's like,
yeah, absolutely.
I watch it all the time. I mean, maybe that's not really what documentary should be about, is like capturing a performance, but or should be like honored. But it's like they're giving them to ones that are about performers and performance in some way, if they're giving it to 20 Feet from Stardom. So I mean,
yeah.
I think I agree that Time and Collective are great. I think they are both like superb examples of the form. They're very different and they're both very important. So it's like, yes, I would recommend. This whole thing about ballots, I obsess about this every year because I'm really into the Oscars. And I know that they will never release ballots for like acting categories because there's just too much ego involved or something. Like people will be like, it affects their salaries. It's all this, but like, why not for Best Picture or Best Documentary or Animated Film or Foreign Film? Like, those are collective projects. It's not just one person's ego at stake. Like Best Picture, especially. Like, there were 8 films nominated this year. Like, why don't they just do it? Let us know how it works. And so much money is spent on campaigning that seems kind of empty, and maybe that would help people understand how it works better.
Yeah, one thing about that would be, like, it seemed really sort of baffling to me and the people I was watching with when, first of all, they put Best Picture, usually it's last, they move it before the major acting categories, and then they do Best Actor in a lead role last. And so it felt like they were teeing up for a really emotional send-off for Chadwick Boseman. And then Anthony Hopkins wins. He's not there. The Oscars don't allow Zoom-in acceptance speeches. And the the ceremony just sort of ends. And we're all just sitting there looking at each other like, what just happened? So I'm sure something like that, if the ballots were made known or something, and it felt like, it seems intuitive that the Academy is the one putting on this ceremony. They should know what's won and schedule it better, you would think, but maybe they don't. Maybe the Soderbergh himself doesn't know, or the producers of the Oscars itself as an event don't have access to that information, and they were just like predicting it or something. It just seems really weird that they would do it like that. And then I heard that there was something about they put in NFTs of Chadwick Boseman in the gift bag or something like that, and it felt like they were using his image to sort of create drama, and then they didn't actually award him the Oscar. So I mean, I love The Father. I thought Anthony Hopkins was great. That was just a baffling moment that could have been solved, I think. Again, like you said, if the ballots were made available.
I totally agree. In fact, I think the next day when I checked in here with Professor Rosen, and he said, I loved the ending. And I was like, what ending? What are you talking about? I was like, wait, the Glenn Close? Like, what do you mean by the ending? I think you loved the demise, right?
No, I mean, it was exactly what Zach said. It was like, it was completely it was like sort of like Moonlight and La La Land or something. It was like a moment made for live television where something truly unpredictable happened, and it kind of unwound, even further. And I think it was just amazing. I'll never forget it. I mean, like that's what I mean by it being a great ending. It will be one of those 3 or 4 Oscar things. And I mean, last year had a more traditional cathartic, like would Parasite actually be able to win Best Picture like last year? Like I was watching it very intently because it seemed like the signs were yes, but I just didn't think they were going to do it. And foreign language film had never done it. There was and it there's a good argument for always keeping Best Picture last. I think like we learned the hard way this year that was really stupid what they did. But the like watching him win Best Director last year, and then like going like, oh my God, this is going to happen, and then like kind of building up to that moment. It was very exciting, like among Oscar broadcasts, like the previous one. So like they completely. Like the Soderberghian like time frame shift or whatever that he does in so many of his movies, like to do that in an award show is kind of stupid. I think we are learning, right?
Yeah.
I love the idea of the Soderbergh cut of the Oscars afterwards. I just can't imagine how.
Well, they shot it. He shot it at 24 frames. He shot it at 24 frames a second, right? Like film. Like it wasn't shot like in the normal. I mean, it's cool. And they had like blurred backgrounds, and they had all kinds of.
Yeah.
It was
I
neat,
noticed,
visually.
I noticed them doing some focus shifting and things like that because there was one point where the actress was sort of to the right of screen and there was like a plant or something in sort of the foreground and they were playing with the focus and stuff like that. Like I just noticed a lot of it trying to be more cinematic than just like, a one wide on just person giving speech, which is kind of cool. And obviously they had the big tracking shot at the beginning with Regina King walking in. So that was fun. Yeah,
I
and that
love
was at the
that.
time because I heard it was going to be like a movie, and then they do this big long tracking shot, and I'm like, is it actually like literally shot like a movie? And it wasn't as much as that going forward, but I was like, at that point, I was like, wow, they're really going for it.
Yeah, another made for live TV moment there when she kind of trips right before she speaks. And she has this amazing entrance, right? It's gorgeous. This, this long take, and then she just kind of slightly fumbles it, and of course saves it. And she does fine in the end. But I wonder, Professor Rosen, if those bookends are kind of great, right? Like live TV just like erupted, into this space, despite its kind of the way they try to curate it for a cinematic kind of feel.
I mean, I think the difference between this ending and like the La La Land Moonlight thing, which I was also watching live and which was super exciting, because you knew something was up, is that there wasn't a lot of noise in the room. I mean, because it was sort of sparse. Like when people were like giving speeches and making sort of laugh lines and stuff, there was very, very little like liveness to that. And I think that part of what Soderbergh was going for in terms of like the lounge, the kind of, that kind of Roosevelt Hotel, like old school thing that he wanted to do really didn't come off because there was nobody was drinking at their tables. Nobody, it was like not a banquet. It was just like banquettes that were empty of food and drink and people kind of forced into them to be on camera, like that part. So you can't do it halfway apparently, or you can't have everything. And it didn't, I mean, I think he's taken so many pot shots and I'm sure there will be a lot of post game that he can participate in, but I liked the attempt. Like I did like that opening very much. I think everybody loved it. I think it was just like, we were all super excited. And then it did sag in the middle, they had a long stretch of like crap, guild awards and things, which I think are important, but they need to shuffle those in better to keep people like interested.
Yeah, I actually really liked they did the 2 humanitarian awards with Bryan Cranston awarding it to those healthcare workers. I thought that was a really great sort of bit because I wanted them to acknowledge the pandemic in some way because it's a room full of celebrities, but like a reduced number, and some of them were wearing masks and some of them aren't. It felt really weird to me coming from a sort of COVID standpoint, and then giving the humanitarian awards to people that have been giving humanitarian aid to COVID during COVID was, I thought, really a good move. And generally, I sort of sleep through those kind of segments. So this time I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I think it'd be cool if they got different auteurs to sort of produce them every year. I think that'd be fun. Let's get my boy Spike on it next year, and you can get some double dolly shots of people as they approach the stage and stuff like that. That's what I want.
I'll vote for that.
We touched on it a little bit. Is the sort of diversity of the Oscars, is it meant to award most important movies? Is it meant to award movies from filmmakers that haven't got their shot yet, from from different communities, things like that? With the hashtag Oscars So White a couple years back, but after that, Moonlight got to win, Parasite won. Nomadland is a smaller movie directed by a woman of color, and the very first woman of color winning for director this year. Do you think we're headed in the right direction? I mean, how optimistic would you be about the future of the Oscars? And then sort of a side question, there's been talk about these diversity quotas. Do you think those are a good idea? And that's a question for both of you. I know, Professor Warren, you teach a race, gender, and sexuality class, and so this could be right up your alley, but it's also sort of an Oscar sheet question. So each of you, just a general take on the diversity.
I noticed in the recap, people discussing it after the fact, there was a lot of backlash against the idea that it was, woke Oscars, right? There's a lot of backlash against this idea. People worrying about how that's splitting the audience. Of course, this year, right, it was like the the drop in attendance was so massive compared to last year, which was already, so we're losing audiences, right? For this kind of event. Is that because they're getting politicized? I don't think so, right? Like, I don't think so. I think there are probably other reasons there, especially, just the live TV format, which people just don't have the patience for. I think these awards matter. I do think they matter politically, and I do think we need to continue to pressure the Academy to take these things into consideration. Frankly, just because they haven't for so long. Like, we don't do it for 4 or 5 years and to say like, okay, that was good, right? Like, thanks for those 3 awards, 2 awards in your 70-year history, like, we're fine now. I think we continue to pressure because, not so much for the awards themselves, but to change the industry as a whole, right? So the more attention we get on this issue, the more projects we can see perhaps coming up through the pipeline, the more support we get for diverse filmmakers along the way, the richer, right? The richer the selection could be every year. And I think we have to continue to keep our eye on this so that, there was a time there were a few, there was sort of like an hour-long stretch when I was watching where I thought like, oh, this is going south, right? Like, this is going south. Like, there were a couple of awards where I felt like, okay, yes, and best supporting actor, and then I was like, oh, Anthony Hopkins, Frances McDormand, and those big awards, So I felt like I feel like the second we take our eye off the ball, there'll be a huge slide backwards on this issue. And so that's why I would say, like, first of all, yes, it matters. And second of all, we continue to pressure for more diverse voters, more diverse filmmakers getting their chance, more attention to kind of different kinds of work than the history of Hollywood has given us. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, I couldn't really add too much to that. I mean, I think if we're just looking at the Oscars rather than the industry as a whole, I mean, the Oscars is, a lot of the voters are people who are, retired and kind of clinging to their Academy privileges as voters as like a huge part of their identity. And some of that is sort of almost like self-consciously conservative, like I like the old way. And like, so if you read the Hollywood Reporter or like how they write about in the weeks leading up to the Oscars, like some voters said that they had trouble like clicking on the link to, and it's like, that's enough to sink a candidacy of like a small film sometimes, or you get the sense that could be the case. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not just about also the representation in terms of like who wins the award or who gets nominated, but also sort of like across all of the different parts of filmmaking, so whether people who are kind of like in high school have access to like, film editing equipment. I mean, everybody essentially does now, in the sense they have a computer or have computers that are good enough to edit film on. I mean that it's really not just about sort of who at the elite level gets to win the trophy this time. In this, it's more about sort of the entirety of how the crews allow people into their midst. And I mean, and we've seen this for years about like how women are treated on crews. I mean, like that was, that really was a kind of quiet, it was a really quiet thing for a long time. Although you would hear it bubbling up, or like women were often sort of pushed into editing as like a kind of like a offset, sort of like cloistered, work. I mean, and many of the greatest editors are women, like historically, but that the kind of those who went into the certain grip areas or whatever were often really, it was like a fraternity hazing ritual and stuff. So it's like, we have to imagine that for, for some of the more blue collar areas, that it's really intimidating for some minorities to sort of be the first, or, to be the breakthrough. So I think like that part of it, I think, is super important. Not just, what percentage of people on the screen sort of match our diversity.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we saw better diversity in the nominees too because of these quotas. I'm saying they're, I'm thinking they're working. I think they're working, and I think it gives people concrete goals, right? And not just these sort of abstract demands, but concrete goals. Like, this is what it should look like. We should see diverse representation in all these categories because all of these movies are out there. Right? I mean, let's not forget that Mank still had the majority of the awards, right? A story about Hollywood and black and white, a story about, it's so self-referential. So, that current is strong, I feel like, within the Academy. And, I'm a supporter. I think these quotas are working.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think just on a more personal note, I'm sort of when I watch movies, I'm sort of reserved that I'm going to see just a white person, and that's like just like I was sort of content with that, and I love movies anyway. But when I watched Sound of Metal, and Riz Ahmed, who's Pakistani, I'm Pakistani, he's got bleached hair in the movie. I had bleached hair at the time. He's really into metal music. I'm really into punk and metal music at the time. So I was watching that movie, and I was right there with him when everything was happening to him. And I almost had to turn it off a couple of times because I was like, this could happen to me. It looks like it is happening to me. So it really hit me when I watched that movie specifically. The power representation. I had sort of been like inclined not to even really care about it because I was like, movies are about white people for the most part, or if they're not, if they're about different communities. It's not that I didn't have empathy for any other community or that didn't realize the representation was important, but I had never really felt it on a personal level. And so Riz Ahmed in that movie, A, just that the movie existed, B, that he was not up for the Oscar was really important for me, and that's who I was rooting for at the end. So yeah, it just sort of a personal anecdote about how I think diversity can be important.
It matters.
Yeah, it matters. I mean, and it's great if it wins awards. I mean, I'm glad that movie is made for you too. I mean, like whether it wins an award or not, that you feel that way about a movie is good. I mean, like very important.
And
Yeah.
that more people might be likely to watch it because of that, right? And then have some empathy, about your experience and the experience of so many people that they maybe don't know enough about.
Definitely, yeah. And I think we had some, like you said, great progress. If you just look at the Best Picture category, Minari is a fantastic movie about immigration. There's a small controversy that it was up for at the Golden Globes. It was up for Best Foreign Language, and that was the problem with that because I feel that movie was intensely American. It's about immigrants coming to the United States and making their lives there and sort of fitting in. And I find that to be a very American story. So, I mean, we're talking about the Oscars now, and it was up for, of course, nominated in Best Picture instead of what they've changed to international film.
Well, let's talk about the Golden Globes. I mean, if you really want to point the finger at like a problematic, like structural body, the Hollywood Foreign Press. I mean, the scandals that they had went through this year probably should end that body and end the right of them to host that award. I mean, they can still have some kind of award. Maybe they should have, the SAG Awards or whatever, like the Independent Spirit Awards, sort of move into that slot or something like that, because that is it's 80 or 90 people who essentially hand out awards to the people who give them the biggest bottle of champagne or the best junket, and who has the money to spend on those campaigns and who are they, so that is like the Oscars. I give them some credit for trying, and for self-awareness and self-laceration or whatever. But the Golden Globes, I think, which I also watch like religiously and I always used to find fun, is like that is like we could expunge that now. Like I think we don't need to continue with that, going down that road at all. Don't you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Oscars are great. I like the Indie Spirit Awards quite a bit because they usually something falls to the cracks at the Oscars that was high on my radar. It ends up at the Indie Spirit Awards. Like last year, I really loved The Lighthouse and Uncut Gems, and Adam Sandler got the Indie Spirit, and Willem Dafoe got the Indie Spirit, and I love those movies. But yeah, and SAG Awards I think are important. Although this year, Delroy Lindo got snubbed at the Globes, at the Oscars, at the Indie Spirits, and at the SAG Award. I don't know how you don't watch that movie and just fall in love with that performance. I literally, it's gonna live with me forever. I don't understand. And this is me personally complaining, but yeah, I think I don't watch the Globes. I sort of read about it on Twitter afterwards. I think you're absolutely right. Probably do away with it and be fine.
Dr. Warren, do you watch the Golden Globes, or do you care?
I feel like I did watch it, but it's like so forgettable now that is this when Jodie Foster went on her couch and gave her? Yeah. So but I don't think of it as like trend setting for the industry. Just to your point, Mark, right? I feel like it's sort of a backup award or kind of like a high like preview of like what might happen later at the Oscars. But I do feel like it really plays second fiddle, and I would not miss it if it went away.
It used to be. I mean, it used to be very. I mean, people definitely spend. If you again go to LA in January and drive down the Sunset Strip, and look at the for your consideration billboards, and some of those people are trying to get their musical or comedy, whatever, like they're like they and how those things get slotted is always just like nonsense. But they try to get it slotted so they can get that nomination for the Golden Globe, which will like stir the path up, or it'll free up funds from Paramount to like continue the campaign, or like that. So it's definitely not like an isolated thing. It actually is part of this ecosystem of of the awards campaign. And since things were all kind of detached and a lot of it was Zoom this year, we didn't see the kind of entirety of it as a kind of Stations of the Cross thing, but it typically is.
I feel like I need to start paying more attention to the Emmys. I've got to be honest. I feel like now that series have really dominated our media landscape, and I think about films like Small Axe, right? These 5-film series. There's no place for it in the Oscars, as far as I can tell. After the O.J. Simpson documentary won for Best Documentary that year, I feel like they really pulled back on the idea of series. And I feel like, frankly, that's where things are headed. I feel like there's so much attention there, especially the public. I feel like if there was more attention for those kinds of series at the Oscars, you'd have a bigger audience. So I feel like I'm going to start paying more attention to the Emmys, because these serialized dramas and documentaries, I think, are really where kind of mass publics are at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was really upset Small Axe didn't get any Oscar attention, because to me, my take on it is that they were 5 films and they aren't really connected beyond some thematic through lines. But I thought that I only saw the first 2. I saw Mangrove and Lovers Rock, but I thought that Letitia Wright in Mangrove absolutely could have got an Oscar for supporting actress. I thought that Mangrove probably could have got, or Lovers Rock probably could have got director or cinematography or something. I thought it was shot really beautifully. So yeah, and from my sort of perspective, those are movies, even though they're in a collection. But Amazon, where you can watch them, categorizes them as a series. IMDb categorizes them as a series. So I guess that's why they weren't at the Oscars. But I was sort of expecting them, because those are some of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think if there was a Best Director this year, like across platforms, I would think that Steve McQueen would be.
Steve McQueen.
I mean, I think deservedly so. And Zach, I would recommend you watch all 5. Like, I think the last one, Education. Have you seen them all, Shiley? Have you?
I think so. Yeah. Tell me about the last one. Remind me.
It's sort of like an autobiographical story of his being sent to like a special school, like when he was like 12. It's not.
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, Lovers Rock is the one that I think most people think is the best. I'd say that the part 5, Education, is incredible. Like, I think it may be the single best thing I saw last year. Like, even better, So like, I would recommend that those people who kind of stopped somewhere in the middle and said, well, I've kind of seen enough, like, should continue through all 5
See
of
them
them.
all.
To your point about like watching the Emmys, you'll find a whole new set of disappointments if you do that. Like, because it's like Modern Family wins 6 years in a row, or This Is Us wins 6 years in a row. It sucks. I mean, it's like
so boring.
It kind of rewards things that's much more like when people say the Oscars are giving like a career award to somebody late in their career. Like, what happens is a series that kind of takes time to get going wins late in its run, and it kind of wins 3 years in a row. And maybe it's going to change because TV has changed so much in the last couple of years. But I find that the Emmys is actually less satisfying than I watch them all. So I mean, like, I watch the Grammys, like I'm like into award shows, but the Emmys is like not especially like Schitt's Creek won like 10 times this year. It was so boring. It's like when Titanic won Best Picture, like same film just kept coming up to the, not good.
Well, that's why I haven't paid attention to it over the years.
You're not missing
but I
it.
feel like now I need to start just to get.
But they're not going to be like rewarding like the best of the documentaries either. It's going to have the same category errors that the Oscars make. I would think. But I think the Oscars should
Where
To
will
your
I go,
point.
Mark? Where will I go for
I know.
Indie spirits.
The Oscars should
Okay, all right.
create-
I'll put that on my calendar. Thank
they
you,
should
Seth.
create a long form documentary category. They should have like super long form.
Agreed.
That would be a good addition. I never hear people talking about that.
Agreed.
Oscars talk.
Yeah. What about the international films, you guys? Did you guys see those or?
Yeah, I saw all of them.
Well, of course, yeah. You saw everything,
yeah.
Zach. Tell us about them. I saw.
I really liked
not
Another
all.
Round. I really thought Quo Vadis Ada was going to win because it feels like another Schindler's List. It feels like it's a whole new genocide that we've never, not, that sounds like it's like an event, but it's just genocide that a lot of people hadn't heard about. And it's a very personal film about, one woman's experience in it. So I really thought that was kind of going to be close. Let me think back about what else was there. Collective was up for international as well as documentary.
Called Better Days, which is from Hong Kong, which I know nothing
Right.
about.
I did not like that movie.
Okay.
It's sort of a melodrama about bullying, and they played clips for that category at the Oscars, and when they played the clip, it was like them crying at each other, and I made a comment where I was like, this could be anywhere in the movie. This is just constantly happening in the movie. Is this people crying? So I did not like the movie very much. What else is there?
Not much buzz in that category this year. I thought Quo Vadis was amazing.
I did
thought it
too.
was amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like you said, like necessary, right?
For
A
sure.
story a story that we need to hear more about for sure.
Yeah, and I loved Another Round. I just thought that and I might have liked it more personally, but I thought it was maybe less important. Am I missing? I feel like I'm missing one.
Yeah, there's one called The Man Who Sold His Skin, which is Tunisian.
Yes. Okay, I did see
that.
that one. Yeah, that one's pretty good. It's a little bit questionable, I think, politically, but it's a really interesting premise. I don't know. Are you guys familiar with the premise?
No.
No, tell us.
So the idea is there's this poor person in Syria, and he's on the bus, and he's with his girlfriend, and he makes this grand gesture where he's like screaming at the bus, and he makes an offhanded comment that like, we need a revolution or something like that. Somebody on the bus happens to be connected to the government. They send him to jail, and he just sort of escapes the country and starts living in, I forget where exactly, another country. And he, by happenstance, meets this famous artist, like a performance artist, not performance, like sort of like a Banksy, but like more public. Mm-hmm. And his idea is, I want to do this big art thing where I tattoo your whole back as part of an art installation. And so he tattoos a visa on his back. And the idea is it was easier to transport him, or it has become easier to transport him across borders when we categorize him as a piece of art versus a human being. Mm. And so that's a big part of it. And then there's this part in the middle where there's like a Syrian justice organization that's like, he's exploiting you because he's making money off of it, and it's just him sort of sitting in a museum for hours on end. It's his new job, essentially. And I thought it was really interesting. I thought the filmmaking was sort of new and interesting. I just had a couple of sort of minor political questions about it, and it's sort of long and hard to connect with in some ways. But it was good. Not my favorite of the bunch, but definitely I thought it was deserved. Yeah, I'm not mad. I'm not mad about Another Round winning. I just thought that Quo Vadis Ada was going to.
I mean, I was pretty sure that Another Round would win. It's very popular. I mean, mm-hmm. I think it is actually broken through as a foreign film. I think it's good. I think Quo Vadis Ada is better. I would think it would, if we were just talking about merits or something, as like a film that I would, like that's like one of the films that people listening who may not have seen very many of them are just looking for ones that they haven't heard of to see. Like it's on Hulu now, which is where I saw it. It's very good and it's gripping. It's not like and a lot of it is actually in English too, or it's kind of polyglot because it's a refugee.
True.
And so it's that may be a little bit easier to stomach in a way. Very good film. I mean, Another Round is definitely like a good film. I mean, I kind of have not heard people really pick it apart in a way that's satisfying, because I think that I felt like dramatically every scene, you know where it's going, and like you sort of know like okay, here come the bottles being open. Like, you know where the scene's going to land. And usually the scene's all wet in that direction. Like, I kind of felt like I was able to predict essentially everything that was about to happen, which is not really a useful film way of critiquing film. But I would think that, like, I was surprised at how sort of conventional a lot of its kind of structure was within. Although I think the performances are great. And I think, like, just seeing it in a different language and seeing, like, the slight cultural differences that define it are extraordinarily meaningful, and also just like watching them eat these great dinners. Or
I really enjoyed the sort of pathos of it was what really drew me to it, and a lot of the sort of humor in its filmmaking. It reminded me kind of like a Cassavetes movie, like just kind of like I felt like I was watching Mikey and Nicky, which I know is Elaine May, not Cassavetes, or like Killing a Chinese Bookie or something, where it's like it's just these kind of guys hanging out, and they're kind of like sleazy a little bit, and they're just drinking and being sort of boisterous. Because there's specifically a scene in Mikey and Nicky, or no, it's in Husbands. That's another Cassavetes movie where it's Ben Gazzara and Peter Falk and John Cassavetes are in this like restaurant, and they're just like drinking, and they're like screaming at the waitress, and they're like singing songs and stuff like that. And that sort of reminded me of the sort of like dudes rock sort of camaraderie part of Another Round, which I thought was really fun. It ends up being sort of a critique of it because of the events that unfold. It's not obviously saying that you should have your blood alcohol level above the line at all times. Like some people brought away from it. I really enjoyed it on that level.
Well, I mean, it's about like male middle age, insecurity and directionlessness. Like, I mean, I think that part of it is actually like what I think is really good about the movie is it's sort of like, well, what do you do? Like, if you're stuck, or you're sort of self-consciously stuck. And I think that there's like the ridiculousness of the premise is actually like very much a good part of the movie. Like, I think that even though it sounded kind of dumb when I first heard like these day drinkers, I was like, no, this is actually a very, very clever. And to me, like you're saying, Cassavetes, like I can see that. To me, it seemed like a Mike Leigh movie without like the bitter undercurrent or something like that. Like there was something about it where it seemed sort of like so everyday slice of life as a kind of premise, or that you kind of set something that didn't sound like it necessarily was like the subject for a film, and just sort of and do like real character work within that. Like that's sort of where I think it's sort of coming from, and so like I am mixed on it. Like but I think like it's not a bad best foreign film winner or international feature. It's definitely like one of the better ones that's won in recent years. It's just not necessarily the best of the year.
Yeah. Have either of you heard? There was news out I saw on Twitter of Leonardo DiCaprio's production company producing an American version of it with him in the Mads Mikkelsen role. Have you all heard about that?
Would not surprise me in the least.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to do an American version, and it'll probably lose whatever charm, or not. I mean, who knows? But
yeah, I think a lot of it is specific to that culture. Like drinking is looked upon differently here. It's just a different, like to make it an American movie doesn't really make the most sense. It reminds me of they announced Adam McKay is doing a series based on Parasite.
Oh, geez.
And it's like, I love that these great international movies are getting Oscar attention. If it means that Hollywood is going to now make Americanized takes on them, I'm more sort of trepidatious about it. What are we getting? Are we getting a Nomadland 2 next year? And 2 Nomadland?
But it seems like Hollywood is really IP obsessive about everything. So it's like it doesn't have to have even been a hit movie in the past. If they own the property already, so like we're gonna remake the Bad News Bears, like why? Or Rollerball, like why? Like the originals were not like does Rollerball have this is already like an old reference, but like does Rollerball have enough cachet from the 70s that they needed to make it in like 2010 or whenever they made the remake? Like nobody cares, and so why not just they say like we're gonna make like a sci-fi action movie, like here's like I'm gonna just hire a writer to do something new. Don't have to call it Rollerball because Rollerball doesn't carry any meaning to anybody today. I just never understand that, that IP is like more valuable than an original script.
Yeah, I just watched a great video essay from Patrick H. Willems on YouTube about the Dick Tracy movie, and one of the points he made was that by the time they made it, which was I think 80s or 90s, but the movie was like sort of for kids because it's like an action movie with bright colors, but the kids at the time would not know who Dick Tracy was. And then the adults that did weren't really interested in action movies anymore. And that was part of why it flopped. I mean, it flopped for other reasons, it being sort of really sort of out there in terms of its VFX, stuff like that. But yeah, it speaks to this obsession with IP, but like for who? Like I watched
HBO just made Perry Mason. I mean, like, who wants Perry Mason? Like, who wants like the sexy Perry Mason thing? Right. Like, I tried watching it, and I was like, just because I was like, I was just curious. Like, I was definitely not like, I need to see what's going on with this character, and it was just like unwatchable. I was like, why did they waste millions and millions of dollars to do this?
Yeah, like
sorry to interrupt you. I was just like that thought, like when you were saying Dick Tracy, I was like, I have actually a really current one. Right. Like.
I watched the movie Scoob, the new Scooby-Doo movie, and it's they include a bunch of other Hanna-Barbera characters. So Dick Dastardly from Wacky Races was in it, and Captain Caveman. And I knew about them because I'm sort of into cartoons and film, and Cartoon Network used to run a series called Boomerang where they would show old cartoons. So I'd like have a knowledge of them. Kids any younger or older than me do not, and and it's clearly a kid's movie. So it's like they were really setting up sort of like this Marvel cinematic Hanna-Barbera universe, which was weird because it's like, who's that for? Yeah. So
well, yeah, I know it's obvious, but maybe you have this question, but I'm really curious what you guys think about Nomadland. Obviously, we mostly talk about her winning in this category, such an important accomplishment and, an important move for the Academy. But what about the film? Do you guys like the film?
I'll let Professor Rosen answer first if he's got a question.
I do. I mean, I haven't done a deep thinking of some of the movie's themes. So it sounds like you're teeing something up. So I'm curious to sort of see what your take is on. But I do, and I think it is beautifully shot, like the writer was. It has a real I'm not saying that's she deserved to win among the nominated directors, and she is an incredible talent who has like an interesting perspective on American culture that I think is very different from most youngish directors. Like, she's not engaging in Hollywood history. She's not aestheticizing, at least beyond a certain level of kind of road movie tropes or something. And she doesn't. So it does feel like you feel like you are very immersed in a sort of authenticity in some way. Now, what the kind of larger picture is implying is I know a lot of people are starting to kind of really try to unwind it. I'm curious where you're going.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. The first time I watched it, I thought it was, it's great to see such a beautiful, careful, well done movie about poor working class people, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't get those that often. If we think about, the history of Hollywood, we don't get those that often. So I feel like the care that she took with that story, the way that she involved, these non-professional actors and this really kind of documentary story underneath it all. I had a real discomfort though with like the star split of it, right? Like, I just couldn't understand why she didn't put someone else in that main role. I know Frances McDormand is amazing. She really did a great job with the role, but I just felt like that split in the movie between kind of the star power of Frances McDormand and the reality of the situation she's trying to document just breaks the movie for me. Like, it just feels unwhole, it just feels like something went wrong there. And in the end, it's really kind of a story of an individual. It doesn't really do the kind of class politics I think it wants to do or it thinks it's doing. And I think a lot of that has to do, in part, I have to say, if you watch it carefully, with the kind of editing, it has a very choppy, like Hollywood language to it, which I feel like also takes away from like the power of its, real story. So there's things like that I don't know. It just felt like it didn't come together for me. And I was curious why everyone loved it so much, because it felt like slightly fissured in its goals. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, I enjoyed it on a higher sort of form level. I thought it was, again, shot incredibly. I think it should have got cinematography. I think Mank looked pretty good, but it was really just sort of interesting because it's black and white. I think cinematography was a lot better in Nomadland. I'm not mad that Franny McDee got the acting nom. I think she was great. I had same with you. I had sort of issues, sort of on a more political level, because I think that couple of things. A, they portray working at Amazon as this sort of like an opportunity to make more money than they ordinarily would, kind of a thing, versus the reality of a lot of those stories about them having to use the restroom while they're standing working and things like that. And on top of that, it's sort of portrayed for Francis's character specifically, and a little bit for David Strathairn's character, a little bit, where both of them sort of can leave at any time and go to their sort of more well-off family.
True.
Versus the entrapment sort of side of it, where a lot of people that are working as poor migrant workers are forced to work in that capacity. So I thought that was, and I'm not sure that it's even really going for a sort of portrait of a class thing. It's more of like a specific woman's grief, and so it works on that level for me. But when I start to think about it as a sort of socioeconomic comment, then I have issues on that level. But I gave it like a 4.5, I think, on Letterboxd out of 5. So I in the end, it sort of won me over. But I do have big issues, like you said as well.
I'm happy it's out there, but then I thought, after all those Trump years, like the first movie to come out is a film that kind of humanizes, I feel like kind of fringe white, working. I don't know. To me, there were enough points of discomfort where I was like, is this really the best movie
And I
right now?
I read a story about the Academy displacing some homeless people that were living near the venue site in order to award a movie about homeless people.
That's what you don't want to hear. I think I always under watch. I mean, I think I was sort of immersed in sort of what I was even learning about the world it was portraying the first time through. And I think the backlash is coming now. I mean, I think it took a while to sort of hit. I mean, and it seems like it's a healthy conversation because it's not just about aesthetics or about a historical story that's being told the wrong way. It's actually about something that's happening now, so I think that is meaningful because typically backlashes are about, well, you're telling the Selma story wrong, or you're telling or like MLK didn't actually say that in the room, and that's not what we're talking about in this movie. We are talking about like an ongoing thing, and it's yes, I do. I think I do owe it to think about sort of what its politics are a little bit more, and I wouldn't say that about most movies. I think I can fully absorb with one viewing most of the time. That's not the case really with this one, and I think it's good enough to be worth our time to.
Yeah. Who wants to come out and criticize, the first, woman to make this giant, amazing film?
Yeah.
Nobody wants, I don't want to spend my energy like taking her down a notch.
Right. Second woman of all time to win Best Director, first woman of color. Yeah, and that's obviously very important. Really, and I think deserve it on a sort of technical level. But yeah, I do have sort of political issues with the film.
I need to step out.
All right.
As you want. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you guys for listening.
Glad you're here. Thank you so much for including him, Zach.
Yeah, that was really fun. It was nice I usually do this with one other person, so to have it as a sort of 3-person conversation has been really interesting. Yeah, I just got one more question that you can answer sort of solo, and then we can end it. We've gone over our usual time. I usually do a half hour, 40 minutes, so now we're nearly double that. So yeah, as I mentioned at the top, in addition to just the Oscars themselves, the film industry is it seems like it's kind of a watershed moment with the pandemic, where Warner Brothers has decided to put all of their big movies, not only in theaters, but on HBO Max at the same time. And with Netflix being as huge as it is, Hulu's making original movies, Amazon's making original movies that are all highly successful and awards worthy. So my question is the most dramatic and alarmist as it possibly can be, are streaming services killing movie theaters?
Of course. Yes. The answer is obviously yes. I mean, I don't think we can get away from it. And I think it's smart to find a way into it. I am not. I don't feel precious or nostalgic for the movie theater. I know a lot of people do, and I get that. I get the collective viewing experience. I get that that's what cinema has been. That's one of the things we love about it is getting out of our homes and into the theater. But I also, that's, as someone who's had kids for the last 17 years, like that hasn't worked for me for a really long time. I have to admit, this is from personal experience, trying to be a film professor and having young kids, I'm usually last to get to a movie. I really am. And if this makes it easier for more people to see the film, I'm here for it, right? I'm here for it. If I can spend $20 to see it and my whole family can see it, like I'm here for that too. So frankly, theaters have been making their money off of our popcorn and our sodas for a really long time. I'm kind of mad at them for that. It's gotten so expensive beyond the reach of, really working class people. It costs $60, $80 to take your family to a movie. That's too much, right? That's too much. So I don't feel a lot of loss here. I got to admit, I know that filmmakers are going to be disappointed that people aren't seeing their films on big screens. I mean, it was what Frances McDormand said. Please go see our movie on the biggest screen you can. I get it, right? I get that part. I think for some of us, that really matters to see the kind of the format that it was meant to be seen on. I think for most people, making it accessible is a bigger win.
Yeah, so I really do care about movie theaters. That's why it's a big thing for me. I've got Cinemark Movie Club where I've got getting a ticket every month, and I'm using it every month. They're never rolling over. I love going to the movies with friends, by myself. I love the smell of popcorn. I love the lights go down, and I think the democratization, like you're saying, is very important. The accessibility is very important. When I'm at home, even if I'm watching it on a big TV or what have you, I find it very easy to just be on my phone. And versus if I'm in a theater, it's like I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm in a theater, which is like a kind of a small thing, but that's something that's important to me.
Yeah.
But I think the accessibility is a big thing. And I read recently, it was the director David Cronenberg who said on Twitter, or I don't think he's on Twitter, but somebody had posted an interview from him on Twitter, where he was actually sort of where you are. But his idea was like, film is evolving, people are evolving. If this is sort of the next step, as films are evolving, then he's sort of all for it. There were the same people that were against, home video right at the beginning, and there were people that were against digital filmmaking when it started to become sort of a thing. So, I mean, in some ways, I feel like there's the Simpsons bit of old man yells at cloud, which feels like me when I'm like defending movie theaters. But yeah, I think the accessibility part of it is really important. Except, I mean, the more cynical side of me is sort of concerned at the corporate nature of it. It's Warner Brothers are putting things on HBO Max not because they necessarily care about the access to it, but because they sort of are striking at movie theaters and they want to make their own Netflix is sort of their plan. And to me, to have a studio that hires all the actors and directors, that owns the studio lots, that owns all that is now in charge of distribution.
Sound familiar?
Right. Exactly, yeah. So Paramount versus the United States, they was overturned recently, and so that's sort of sad to me in a sort of antitrust leftist way, because I feel like this constitutes
Wait, this is monopoly. News to me. Are you serious?
Yeah, it happened like last year.
Well, where was I?
There was a lawsuit involving, I think, either Netflix or Apple, and they decided to overturn it. It was during Trump's presidency.
So basically opening the door for vertical reintegration again.
Opening the door for Disney to scoop up and buy AMC or Cinemark that were having problems during the pandemic. And specifically setting legal precedent that these streaming services are allowed to exist. But in my head, I think it constitutes a vertical monopoly if you're owning all the way the step from pitching the movie to distributing it, which you are sort of de facto distributing it through obviously releasing it on Netflix. So that's sort of my those are my sort of cynical questions about it. I think that, the accessibility is important, but those are my sort of hesitations.
Fair. I think that's a really important concern. And, we see every platform encroaching out, so Netflix used to just exhibit. Now, obviously, it plays a bigger role in production. And that's going to start to shape what's out there, right? I mean, clearly, what's most profitable, what the algorithm tells, these platforms to make, et cetera. So I think you're right. I think there's a cautionary note there about how that's going to affect what's out there. On the other hand, as we've been studying this semester, filmmakers really are largely in support of these platforms because of the kind of access it guarantees them, right? These sort of like global exhibition, upfront check, like not waiting for studios to pick them up at festivals. What's it going to do to the festival circuit might be another question, right? I mean, what's going to happen when the festival is no longer the marketplace for distributors to pick up these movies? I think, I hear you. I think there's a cautionary note to be said there about how it's going to affect, particularly, what gets made.
And I sort of talk big, but I also have a laundry list of streaming services that I have that I watch, and it's like, I'm trying to watch a whole lot of movies, and it's just like this sort of patchwork of rights issues and where they are at and stuff like that. In addition to the new stuff, Da 5 Bloods, which I love, is a Netflix original. So
you see,
and I think something that's interesting. Is it a matter of time before Criterion starts making their own originals? I think that'd be cool. The Criterion Channel original. That's what I want.
Great question. Now there's a platform I think that we could, we might say like, you go ahead, right? You go ahead and start producing stuff and see what comes out there. I could see some good work coming out of something like Criterion for sure. Although, it's also had its scandals about representation and, it's kind of auteur sensibilities shutting people out. So
and I have like 2 of the 8 or whatever movies directed by people of color in the Criterion, or Black people in the Criterion collection, because I have both of the Spike Lees that are in there, of course. But I think you raised a question about sort of what's being made. I remember when I was sort of a kid, this is a little bit embarrassing how I get there, but I used to play golf in middle school, and on the drive over to practice every Saturday, me and my father would listen to NPR. And there was a story right when House of Cards was premiering that Netflix literally took focus groups. This is their very first streaming original. They literally took focus groups that said, A, Kevin Spacey is popular, B, political thrillers are popular. Let's just do that. And so if that's what's driving,
and people love David Fincher, and people love David Fincher. Don't forget the trifecta.
Right. So if that's what's driving what Netflix is making, and it doesn't seem to be. I mean, if Charlie Kaufman can get a Netflix movie, maybe it's not as much driven by popular demand or what have you. But if that's what's driving production, that's also a little bit concerning.
That is what's driving production, Zach. I mean, maybe stuff is sneaking through there, like you said, Charlie Kaufman. On the other hand, he's had a lot of movies that have done well. So, I mean, I don't know if he would be absent from the algorithm if you put it in there, right? So is driving, on the other hand, House of Cards, great show. A great show. So, are they, I mean, time will tell. Let's just say that time will tell. We know that the history of capitalism is somehow going to screw over certain people, right? People are going to be left out and marginalized. Stories are not going to be told. If dollars are driving the business, we can probably guarantee some problems.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Netflix's fault specifically, but for Da 5 Bloods, which I'm going to keep bringing up every few minutes, I have a contractual obligation to Spike. In that movie, there are flashbacks to Vietnam where there is no de-aging at all. The characters are played by actors in their 60s, 70s that are acting as if they're 20-year-olds in Vietnam, versus the 3.5-hour epic Irishman that
Yeah.
spends however millions on Al Pacino and Robert De Niro to look younger. So you look at what the differences are, and it seems to me that it's because of what Spike Lee looks like, and it's not a new thing. I remember the story about when he made Malcolm X, how he had to like go to his famous friends, I think
Yeah.
Oprah and Michael Jordan, like help, and Prince actually helped fund the latter half of Malcolm X when he goes to Egypt. Um, but so it's not really new that studios are sort of ignoring Spike, whether that's because he speaks
Mhm.
sort of truth to power, or if that's because he
Mm.
is a prominent black filmmaker. But he's
Mhm.
one of the most famous black filmmakers. If you, I mean, and one of the most famous
If Spike
directors.
can't get it done, imagine,
Right,
right? Like
exactly.
if he,
That's my point. If Netflix isn't going to
yeah,
give him the money,
yeah.
that's my
Well, maybe they should
concern.
give nobody the money for that though, because let's admit it, that is like
Just
maybe
cast
an
younger actors.
unnecessary. Yes, I mean, what have we been doing all along? We cast different actors as the young people. We're okay with that. We can do that. Or actually, frankly, maybe it's more interesting to not do it, right? And to do
Right.
something
I remember.
cinematic that's not about just, that kind of realism. Why not?
Yeah, I remember watching it and reading into it, thinking, "Oh, it's sort of a memory, so it makes sense to have it them in their current
Mhm.
form, remembering how it would be looking at themselves with their current lenses." And like they didn't, and the difference between Chadwick Boseman's character, who's not present in the later half because he dies in the Vietnam, the idea that he didn't get a chance to grow old, while they did, as a sort of visual contrast with the non-de-age act. So I was reading into it a
You
hundred
see?
ways until I read the story that Spike's like, they just didn't give us the money, and it's like, oh, okay.
But something more interesting happened. I mean, that's what, like these kinds of artistic constraints produce like, an art that begs interpretation. That seems to me worthwhile, rather than just like, oh, seamless kind of fakeness, I think probably I would rather watch that than the Irishman, let's put it that way.
Yeah. I like the Irishman, but yeah, it looks like a PlayStation character some of the time. It
Not
didn't.
good. I don't like
Yeah,
it. It's right in there in that uncanny valley for me where I'm
yeah,
just creeped out by it for sure.
definitely.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this, and I hope we have enough good nuggets there. Maybe you can edit something together that's not onerous, but covers the ground you were hoping to.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I think I've definitely got what I came for. Yeah, as I said, it's usually like I get a poli sci prof on or something, and we're talking about some current event, and it's like I'm not. I mean, I'm a poli sci major, so I can get somewhat excited about it, but film is what I really love, and so we just sort of end up talking for an hour plus when we meant to talk for half an hour. So
Exactly. Yeah, really fun. And you got me you lit the fire under me a little. I watched a couple films there real quick and just to be ready, but I've got more to watch. We didn't get to talk about this in the podcast, but I was really sad for Love Letter to Latasha. I thought that was another, documentary in both categories. I was like, I saw Colette too, and I mean, I get it,
yeah,
I get it, but I was like, that was not an interesting film. I mean, it was a good
right,
story, but it was not an
yeah,
interesting film.
no, I would
Love
agree.
Letter for Latasha was like a beautiful, thoughtful, formally interesting film. Like that's where the award
Yeah.
needs to
I
go.
thought Love Song for Latasha was more interesting in terms of form, and then I thought that what is it called? Wide Eye, the movie about the Hong Kong protest, was more important and sort of had a lot of journalistic importance that I thought would win. Yeah, I think my least favorite short of any of the short categories ended up winning, and that was Citizen Strangers, which I feel is totally
Okay, I
in
haven't
bad
seen that one
taste
yet.
and missed the mark. Well, the premise is that it's like a time loop, like Groundhog Day, but centered around the police shooting of a black man. And it's an interesting premise, I thought, because it's like it's speaking to like it feels like we're living the same day over and over when we hear news like
Oh,
this.
right.
But the optics of it are a black man being murdered
Over
over
and
and over
over.
again, and they derive some comedy from it that really does not work. And it's there's sort of the character there's a sort of caricatures, and it just really fell flat for me when I feel like there are other fantastic like um, what's the doc called? Maybe I got it mixed up. I did get yeah. The Hong Kong doc is called Do Not Split. The doc I'm about to talk about is called Wide Eye. Wide Eye is about it's like a spiritual successor to Bicycle Thieves. Like it's about this guy he finds his bike that was stolen and he wants to retrieve it. And he finds out that the person that has it bought it lawfully and is an undocumented immigrant that needs it to get to his job. And it's a dilemma of, well, I needed two to get to my job, but you also, and it was stolen from me, but you bought it legally from the guy that stole it from me, and you maybe need it more. And so it becomes an issue like that. And there's a great short called Feeling Through that was about a blind and deaf gentleman in the big city, and that was a really great documentary about sort of perspective and empathy. And then in the animated category, I mean, I liked If Anything Happens, I Love You, and I think it's it's saying something. But both Genius, Loki, I think is how you say it, and Opera really challenged the form. I've never seen anything like this short film Opera. It stuck with me. It's doing things with film I didn't really know you could do. Like, it's really interesting.
Cool.
And it was great to see on the big screen specifically because it's a very intricate thing. Because I went to Cinemark to see all the shorts.
All the shorts. Nominated. Oh, nice. Yeah. Good idea.
That was really great.
I'm going to do that one year. Yeah. I love shorts.
No, me too. I was much more excited about, or I think a lot of them were more interesting about the shorts and the documentaries than it was about a lot of the Best Picture movies. Like I love Minari, and I love Sound of Metal, like I said, but like a lot of them I was like, okay. Like Promising Young Woman, I thought was just okay. I have some political issues with it. Judas and the Black Messiah, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like excited by them.
I'm glad it's there. I'm glad I saw it, but.
Yeah. I just wasn't excited about them the way that I was about some of the shorts and some of the docs.
Interesting. Yeah.
We were wrapping up and then we went on this long.
And then we started all over again. Okay, now for real now. For real now. I'm going to run.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the show. Before we leave, is there anything you want to plug? Do you want to plug any social media or anything going on with anything?
I just film studies, really. Plug the minor, plug the concentration. Zach, you're doing a minor. And we're hoping to bring in somebody new this coming year to teach film, somebody specifically to do kind of human rights and trauma and memory and maybe documentary. So we're trying to build up our film program. We've got a great minor. I think even if you have to take the same classes, classes with, me or Dr. McLean over and over again, you can still have a great experience. So I would definitely say if you have any interest in film, we have a great time discussing these issues in class, and we back it up, with some good history and theory. And if you love to talk about film, then I've got the class for you.
Yeah, and I can personally attest. I've taken, like I said, 3 courses with you, Professor Warren. I think understanding film was great, just exposing me to a lot of classics. Like I said, Bicycle Thieves is a favorite now still. Movies like that. And then Global Women's was fantastic. I loved watching. Daughters of the Dust has really stuck with me specifically, and a lot of movies like that. And then right now we're in binge watching documentary, which is really interesting. So yeah, if you're interested in film, definitely look at that. And it's not that it's relatively easy to pursue a minor. I want to say to listeners, because I already had it counts double sort of my understanding counted as an art credit for my major and counts as a prereq for the minor, and a lot of it counts double like that. So it ended up being relatively easy to pursue a minor. So if you're all interested, definitely check that out.
I'm so glad to hear that. That was something we really tried to make possible for people. So I'm really glad to hear that it worked out that way for you.
Yeah. Again, thanks again for being here. Thanks for everyone listening. I've been Zach Qureshi, and as always, peace in the Mideast.